Alrighty, it is Sunday, October 12th. I am joined by a man going by the name Punished Richard, Richard Senek's co-host of the Bad Role Models podcast, to discuss, honestly, one of the greatest movies ever made, Magnolia, 1999, by Paul Thomas Anderson, and what I will just go ahead and say is my favorite movie ever, in the superlative sense. So I'm really stoked to talk about this movie. I have 10 million ideas about what this movie means and so on. I think I have now watched it 4 times, and it's 3 hours and 20 minutes long. So that's quite a lot of time living in Paul Thomas Anderson's head. But Richard, where do you want to start with this vast cinematic tapestry?
Probably my headspace for a moment. Will, have you ever seen the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, another piece of prestige cinema?
The first one, right? Where
First
Plankton
one, yeah.
Puts buckets on everyone's head?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know that scene where SpongeBob and Patrick, it's near the end of the movie, where they're put on the drying rack and they're shriveling up and holding hands and crying because they know it's the end?
I had forgotten, but I think I remember now.
That is how I feel emotionally with you after watching this movie.
Oh yeah, this movie falls on people like a Steinway piano dropped from the 6th story of a building. It is heavy and loud and quite amazing in its power. So I hope you feel better. I hope we can talk about it, Richard.
I'm ready.
Are you ready to share with the group what this bad movie did to you?
I have my C4, my big boy juice, and I'm ready to hop into it. Will, I have a question for you, and one that I will probably answer myself as well once you're done. Talk me through the first time you watched this movie. What was the context? How did you feel?
The first time I watched this movie, it was off a totally blind recommendation from a movie website that had compiled a list of fan voted favorite movies, because I was like 17 or 18 years old, and so they'd created this chart of top 100 movies, and because I was at the age where I was trying to have better taste and know more shit than everyone around me, I treated that thing like a to-do list. I checked them off one after another. And I remember the first one, number 1 seed was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Number 2, I think, was maybe Tarkovsky, like Stalker. And then Magnolia was number 5 on the list. And so I was, I think still in high school, like 17 or 18 years old. And I had the house to myself because I'd been planning to watch this movie like for a really long time. But it's 3 hours and 20 minutes, and I was in a phase in life where I was like, no, like if I'm gonna watch a movie, like I'm gonna darken the entire room, and I'm gonna turn my cell phone off. Like I actually have a little bit of respect for baby teenage me, and how committed he was to watching movies. But yeah, so I got the house to myself finally. I put this movie on, and I hit play, and it was pretty obvious from the first 4 minutes that this movie was not like anything I had ever seen, and had a sense of humor and a sense of style that was completely new to me. And it was this movie, as well as Ingmar Bergman's movie Wild Strawberries, that made me see film as a serious art form when I was young. Because I grew up. Sorry for overindulging myself on this answer,
no, please
but
do.
I grew up seeing movies as of secondary status to the fine arts and literature, right? So, like in my hierarchy of stuff, it was like there was the stupid 17-year-old way of thinking. It's like, okay, at the top of the pinnacle of whatever is the great books of the Western canon, and then below that is like the canonical art of, the Renaissance and so forth. And then down from there, like way, way further, you get things like plays, and then operas, and then even lower than that, you get stuff like movies and TV. And like if you stretch a line from that divides art from entertainment, I was like, movies are just sometimes they're interesting, sometimes they do things that can't be done in books or in paintings, but for the most part, movies are Independence Day, Jumanji,
Mhm.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and there's nothing wrong with liking those movies, but they definitely are more entertainment than art. But yeah, when I watched Magnolia, I realized that a movie can be as profound as anything.
Beautifully said. I get where you're coming from too. I was not emotionally ready for this movie when I saw it for the first time. I think I mentioned in the last episode, my first tryst with Paul Thomas Anderson was in late high school when I was around 17, 18. And I watched There Will Be Blood, and I didn't get it at the time because I didn't really have a palate for movies, or at least slower ones. And so I kind of just threw Paul Thomas Anderson away. And then as I mentioned before, I watched Licorice Pizza, and even though I had some qualms about the plot of that movie, I found it interesting enough, and I heard his name pop up enough that I decided to continue to investigate. So I rewatched There Will Be Blood. That definitely changed my perspective on it. Uh, and then I watched Boogie Nights, and Boogie Nights was really where Paul Thomas Anderson took off for me. Will and I actually considered talking about it in this episode, but frankly, we have so much to talk about with Magnolia that we can cover that another time. But long story short, it rapidly became maybe one of my top three movies of all time. And so jump forward a little bit. Sorry, jump forward a little bit, and I'm working a job that I hate. It's very unpleasant. I am just kind of living in an apartment that I'm not super stoked about, and I decide, I want to watch a movie that's like emotionally moving. And so, I don't have to wake up the next day. I have the day off. It's like 9 p.m. maybe. I crack open a beer and sit down, and I tell myself to watch Magnolia. So I turn it on, and I think that this is a decent segue for us getting into the intro to the movie. So the movie starts off as, I don't even know how to put it, a series of vignettes. And all of them describe very, very chance encounters that are hard to believe. There's one where a man who decides to commit suicide jumps off of the top of this building and coincidentally is shot in the chest as he falls down because somebody was trying to shoot their husband. And then he lands on a safety net that would have saved him, but he dies anyways. There was another one where there was a man who was diving. At some point, a plane flew down because there was wildfires, and the plane flew down to collect water. And this man was coincidentally sucked into the plane and died of a heart attack. So as this plane is dropping water on the fires, people look up and they just see this dead diver in a tree. In another coincidence, the man who had picked him up in the plane was the diver was a poker dealer, and the pilot of the plane had gone to the casino, and the guy was his dealer, and the pilot ends up completely washing away all his cash and beats the shit out of him. And once he finds out that that's the man he accidentally murdered, he also takes his own life. And there are a couple of other examples, but we'll talk about this more later. But what they're setting you up for is that, in your mundane little lives where you feel trapped, sometimes life runs up to you and cracks an ammonia stick underneath your nose and completely
Yes.
completely mentally resets you in ways that almost feel cartoonish.
Oh, well said. Well said. Yeah, there's a slogan in avant-garde art that art is supposed to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I think this movie definitely does this. I think that this movie, despite being 3 hours and 20 minutes long, is a masterpiece of compression of how much you can fit into one story. And I kind of put it in this line that goes back to okay, so there's Homer's Odyssey, which is an adventure in 20 years. There's James Joyce's Ulysses, which is that same scale of adventure in one day. And then there's something like Magnolia, which is 10 adventures in one day, right?
Yeah.
Because this entire movie unfolds over the course of like maybe like 36 hours, I think,
Hmm.
a day and a half at most. And in terms of the principal action of the movie, and it just feels like one thing slamming into another. It feels like billiard balls, or if you run with the main metaphor, the magnolia, the flower. It's as if all of these different people are, as you see in like the art for the posters and stuff, all of these people are petals on the same flower and they don't know it. They think they are their own flower. They're not. They're part of this weird Los Angeles superorganism that
Hmm.
happens to run off of Magnolia Avenue. And that's what PTA, I think, is trying to say with this movie, and with the way that these apparently unconnected lives actually crisscross and intersect like a spider web. So, yeah,
Yeah, and that's
surely.
that's a really good point because I brought up vignettes in the beginning, and you brought up 10 separate adventures. But something, audience, that you should know is that this is not an anthology film. This is not 10 separate adventures. This is jumping in between 10 separate people, and every single scene means something. All of it adds together, and at every single scene, one character passes the baton to another even if they don't know each other. All of them are interconnected in all of these different ways. Uh, well, I actually want to ask you, do you have a favorite character? Because I do. I have two favorite characters.
Yeah, my favorite character is fucking Stanley. Or dang, I did it. I cursed.
Ah, wait,
Almost.
actually, we're past 10 minutes though.
Oh, okay.
So,
Sorry.
audience, for
I'm gonna
context.
retake. I'm gonna retake though.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, my favorite character is Stanley.
Hmm.
No doubt.
Uh, Elaborate on that. What do you like about him?
Well, Stanley is the kid who ends up on this game show called What Do Kids Know, which is about like child trivia champions going up against adults. Like imagine Jeopardy where you have three adults and three kids, and that's essentially the show. And Stanley is this beautiful, shy, sensitive, very intelligent, very curious kid who really struggles with his home life, like the kind of kid that as a teacher you feel a certain protectiveness over and a certain uh, admiration for, that is tricky to explain to non-education people. But when you meet real life Stanleys working in schools, you drop everything you're thinking and doing to
Mhm.
help kids like that. And so he's also put under huge pressure from his asshole father to go and win a bunch of money in this game show. And if I had to compare Stanley to a real life person, it would be a young Mozart,
Mhm.
and to a certain extent, a young Beethoven. And I can talk more about that another time or whatever. But yeah, I mean, Stanley to me was the most sympathetic character, I think. He was the character that I felt the most strongly about. I felt bad for the other characters, or I felt disgusted by them, or I felt perplexed or horrified on their behalf. But only with Stanley, I think, did I really have like what you could call like genuine sympathy, or
Mhm.
a feeling of I understand this character.
Yeah.
I know how this kid feels.
You just
And
want to like reach through the screen and just grab him and take him out of that situation the entire time because he's such a good-natured kid. I don't know if we already established this, but what's going on with him is that for whatever reason they don't elaborate on it. His mom's not in the picture, and Stanley's an incredibly gifted kid, and his dad Rick. It's implied that he is a near do well in show business. He really can't maintain his own career, and it's not really going anywhere. So what he does is he takes his son and puts him on the trivia circuit. Oh, what year was the Eiffel Tower made? And the thing about Stanley is all he needs to hear is a couple buzz phrases, and he can answer a question before the host even finishes saying it. And so he has a really weird relationship with his dad, because when Stanley's making his dad money, he's like, "Hey, champ, hey, slugger, how if you do really well on this one, I'll go get you an ice cream." But the second Stanley tries to have any level of agency or independence, his dad gets mean. He grabs his shoulders and shakes him, because at the end of the day, his dad's a grifter. I was thinking about those pageants, those kid pageants they do, like Honey Boo Boo, where you have the moms
Yeah.
and dads that are the show business parents that are just lizards. They are just lizard people, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, and his dad is an ironic character in a lot of ways. Like his dad is some sort of failed actor, and he yells at Stanley for quote unquote making him late to a very important audition. And meanwhile, he is making Stanley late to the actual important thing that Stanley is doing as a child actor slash contestant, which is performing in like the championship round of this like, many thousands of dollars prize show. And so the dad is missing the point in a pretty big way. And the dad even gives a speech to the other parents when they're in the green room about how you have to be kind of sadistic to your children if you want them to do what they're told. And so, yeah, it's a pretty disgusting image, and Stanley deserves a better father. He has a confrontation with his father near the end of the movie, where after running away from home and being out the entire night, and his dad not knowing where he is and so forth, he wakes his dad up and says, "Dad, you have to be nicer to me." And it's a very moving scene. It's a very moving scene.
Yeah, it's rough. Can I talk about my favorite characters for a second?
Yes, I was just about to ask you. Yes, Richard, who are your favorite?
I really want to talk about them because I like them.
Okay,
I like them a lot.
Go.
I don't know. They're just nice. They're just such nice dudes. So the two characters that stood out to me as really heartwarming in a movie that can be tragic are Jim, the police officer, and Donnie, the former child prodigy. So, audience, Jim is played by John C. Reilly, who is kind of a PTA regular. He shows up in a lot of his movies, and he plays this really authentic, humble pie cop. He wakes up every morning, he has his coffee, he's got a crucifix on the wall that he prays to, and there is one thing he wants more than anything else, and that is for a woman that he can give his love to and love him back. He makes advertisements for it on television, and really, he's just a stand-up dude. And the other guy that I like, Donnie, is he's like a former Stanley. So Donnie, when he was a kid, was another child prodigy. At some point, you see an old CRT TV playing clips from when he used to be on game shows, and it looks like it's from the early 80s, late 70s. And he, I don't know why they included this detail, but his parents stole all of his money, and nowadays he's not nearly as smart as he used to be because he got struck by lightning.
I'm sick. I'm sick here now. I confuse melancholy with depression sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You see,
Why don't you run along now, friend? Your dessert is getting cold.
I'm sick.
Stay that way.
I'm sick and I'm in love.
You seem the sort of person who confuses the two.
That's right. That's the first time you've been right. I confuse the two, and I don't care. Hey. Hey! I love you. I love you, and I'm sick. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm getting corrective oral surgery tomorrow for my teeth. I love you, Brad. Brad, the bartender. You want to love me back? I'll be good to you. I'll be goddamn good for you. I won't be mad if you don't know someone.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I include him with Jim is because he and Jim are kind of two sides of the coin, where Donnie actually says in this one scene, so Donnie is in love with a bartender at this bar that he frequents. It's a man. And it's a guy that doesn't really look at him. Donnie is very timid, very anxious. So he's the kind of person that goes to the bar, sits down, looks at the bartender interact, and sort of fantasizes about this life they could have together. And at some point, he says this line that almost brought me to tears. He just said, I have, or my name is Donnie Smith, and I have lots of love to give. And he's tearing up while he says it, and it's really cute. And this entire time, he works at like a used car store or something, and he's trying to save up money to get braces, even though his teeth are just fine. And the only reason why he's doing it is because the bartender has braces, and he thinks that he's going to like him because of it. And I don't know, both of their roles in this movie are, I mean, they get different outcomes. I'll say that much. But to me, they're just, what I like about them is that they're one of the few examples in this movie, kind of like Stanley, of somebody who just comes across to me as a really pure soul in LA, in a place where these men would have been much happier in San Luis Obispo or in the Pacific Northwest, in a small town where they could meet a girl in high school or a guy and give him a daisy and fall in love forever. But instead, they're in this concrete jungle in a time and place that they probably had no right to be born in. You know, this place where they're just not well equipped for their environment to find love.
Yeah, I mean, like another movie that you could make a direct comparison with is Eyes Wide Shut, in the sense that they both came out around the same time, and they are both basically about how awful Hollywood is.
They're Lost Highway.
Yes, and Lost Highway. Like in the late 90s, Kubrick, PTA, and Lynch all came out and were just in allegorical form in these movies. And we're like, listen, Hollywood is a massive, human trafficking and sex trafficking operation, and it's run in this secretive, nefarious manner, which is also, a major thread in Magnolia, and gets into pretty geeky and disturbing territory. But let's start now to like reel out the plot a little bit. So
okay.
There's this opening where they show historical examples of all these weird coincidences. And as they're doing this, there's a sort of narrator coming over the top saying that, this happened and this happened and this happened. And could this all be just due to chance? No way, Jose. And that's the basic message that comes in at the beginning. And from there, you start to get a quick shot by shot picture of how all these different characters start their mornings. So there's this fantastic shot where I'm going to see if I can describe it here. So the way the camera moves is this woman with this blonde woman is sitting at a bar, and she is drinking by herself, and there's a TV playing over her shoulder in the background, and it is one of our characters, Tom Cruise, selling the Seduce and Destroy pickup artist course, which you can dial this number to attend a workshop. And
really quickly, the number is 18777 Her. Can I quote the commercial? It's horrible, but it's expertly written.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the guy's name is, so imagine a young Tom Cruise with his hair up into a man bun. He looks like the most LA male manipulator you could possibly imagine. And I'm sure, audience, that you can picture exactly what I'm talking about. So this is what he says verbatim. He says, "In this big game that we play called life, it's not what you hope for. It's not what you deserve. It's what you take. I'm Frank T.J. Mackie, a master of the muff, and the author of Seduce and Destroy Method." And audience, he will drop some hard lines. And I don't mean hard lines in like the conscious bars, like the common sense. I mean in the most sexist shit you've ever heard in your entire life sense. This man is the proto Andrew Tate.
Yeah, he is based on this pickup artist whose name I can't remember, but who this is a real character. Like
the guy that wrote The Secret, right?
The Secret? No, that was a book. That was a book about the law of attraction, which was written by a woman back in like the early, like
Oh, I'm thinking about
2002.
something very different.
You're
then.
thinking about something else. No, I don't know. Whatever. The point is that so you got this Tom Cruise guy, and one of the really ironic things is when he's doing this commercial and explaining his secret pickup artist method, he says, language, you see, that is the key to unlocking the female psyche or whatever, the subtle use of words and blah blah blah. And then the next shot is just a really ugly looking guy, no offense, walking up to the bar, looking at this lady and just saying, hey, just the word hey. And then it smash cuts to them back at her apartment doing a rail of cocaine. And then just one more word, he looks at her and he goes, so. And then the next shot is them fucking. And so it's poking fun at the whole, like, oh, the key to picking someone up is, some sophisticated language game. It's like, no, it turns out the key to picking someone up is going up to someone who is so completely desperate for any kind of positive anything that they will fold at the slightest invitation. But it gets even better because as they're fucking, and again, the way the camera moves through this is like the way that like a fiber optic camera would move through like a sewer pipe. Like you just see this extrusion as you go into this world where, okay, now it started with the TV, then they're at the bar, then they're at their house, then they're fucking, and then in a way, like Videodrome manner, it goes back into the TV because you look over her shoulder and the television is showing this commercial or pre-run for the game show What Do Kids Know, which you later learn the host, the Alex Trebek of this show,
Jimmy Gator.
Jimmy Gator is her father and probably a child molester, and definitely someone that molested her, which would of course imply that he is a child molester. Anyway, the point is that all of this linkage is just formed by the way the camera just like drops through 500 feet of human geological layers. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like this movie. It's just incredible.
Well, and what's amazing about it to me is that it's not complicated. I mean, it is in the background, but as the viewer, the reason why this movie is so well constructed is at no point did I ever feel lost. And I'm not some cinema expert. I can get lost in an overly obtuse movie. He jumps between these characters so organically that you just don't even think about it. You are leapfrogging, you are pogo sticking from one moment in one person's life to another, and somehow they all link up perfectly. Like, Will mentioned Gary Gator, and he also mentioned the blonde lady. She's one of our 10 characters. Her name is Claudia Gator. And I mentioned before that, and I won't go too far into it because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but this is an example of how well this movie transitions. So one of my favorite characters, Jim, John C. Reilly, ends up going to a house call, a noise complaint, and meets Claudia. And they end up, I don't know how to phrase it, they strike up an awkward romance. They're like two separate animals trying to understand one another, but they're also interested in one another and what they're giving off. But Will, you'll probably remember the name of it. There is a point where Stanley starts getting sick of being on the talk show What Kids Know, and he sings a song. Do you remember the name of the song? It's in French, I want to say.
Oh, it's the habanera from Carmen.
Yeah, so he starts singing that song to answer one of the questions for, I believe, extra credit. And as he's singing it, the actual song starts playing in the background, and then it transitions to a scene of Jim and Claudia not even really flirting. They remind me of two kids almost. Two people that have never been in love in their life, really anxiously wanting to talk to each other but having no idea what to say. And as the scene, it didn't even click at first. There was this point like 2 minutes into the scene where I was like, oh, that song's still playing. And it's the perfect choice for their conversation. It's the perfect background. By the way, audience, I apologize in advance because this entire review is basically going to be Will and I gushing about how much we adore this movie and how we both think it's the most genius show on the planet.
Yeah, I mean,
I
let me
apologize
just
for
go
the cuss
ahead.
words. My bad.
I mean, I'll just get it out of the way. I'll say some of the things I think are bad about this movie, and stuff I don't like about it.
Mhm.
No, I can't think of anything. Okay, anyway, back to the stuff that's great about this movie. So, the song you mentioned, the habanera from Carmen, I was like, I'm sure PTA put this in here for a reason, so I looked it up, and it's absolutely in there for a reason. And let me read the lyrics. I'll pause for a sec here. Okay, so it's in French, and the play Carmen, or the opera Carmen rather, which I have seen, is about this woman Carmen who everyone falls in love with, and she's like a siren amongst the rocks, and she ruins people through her love for them. And so some of the lyrics of this, yeah. So, when will I love you, my lord? I don't know. Maybe never, maybe tomorrow, but not today. That's for sure. And then this is the key part. Love is a rebellious bird that no one can tame, and you call him quite in vain if it suits him not to come. Nothing helps, neither threat nor prayer. One man talks well, the other keeps quiet. It's the other one that I prefer. He's said nothing, but I like him. Love is a gypsy child. He has never, never, ever known the law. If you love me not, then I love you. And if I love you, you better watch out. You better watch out. And then she goes on, right? And so the point of this is, love can't be forced, and it has a sort of contrary character to it, and it's perfect because you see the way these two are interacting, and like the whole thing with the coffee, where she pretends that she wants to give him coffee, he pretends that he wants to drink it, she makes it for him, and he pretends to think it's good, and she pretends not to notice that he's disgusted by her coffee, and so forth. And you can feel them kind of like they're both trying to stay in their separate roles of like the police officer, and then the woman who's just trying to get through this without all her coke getting found. There's just this beautiful moment where he leaves after not asking her out, and he pauses on the stairwell, and she pauses at the door, and you can tell like they're both really hoping it'll happen. And then he just goes, okay, and he goes back in there and asks her out on a date, and it's an extremely cute scene. There's a lot of heartwarming stuff in this movie, and I thought that was one of those scenes. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's what endeared me. You know what? I'll include Claudia in one of my favorite characters too, because she's not as happy-go-lucky naturally as Donnie and Jim. Granted, Donnie is maybe the most unlucky man on the planet, but she made me really sad to see on screen, because the reason she's so troubled is because it is implied, like Will mentioned, that she had an adverse childhood, let's say. And for a lot of people in her situation, they recreate that trauma repeatedly in their life, almost as a coping mechanism. And the issue is that trauma continues to compound on itself repeatedly until you are trapped in a loop of viewing yourself as, I am a broken person, and that is immutable. That is a core part of my character. And it's not true, obviously. She obviously has lovely qualities, and I think that's why it was so good to watch Jim interact with her, because Jim is such a pure soul that he doesn't see any of that. He sees a lady that he has a crush on. He likes her personality. He likes her smile. And at some point when they end up going on that date, she tells him, she says, hey, I want to play a game with you, because they're trying to make small talk and it's not really going anywhere. I want to play a game with you. I tell you everything about me, and you tell me everything about you. Let's not do this fake shit. Let's not do the bullshit. I want us to see each other. And he's like, okay. And she never outright says, how she's messed up, but she says like, I'm a broken, bad person, and I'm scared that if I tell you who I am, that you're going to leave, because you're such a good guy. You have a good job, yada, yada, yada. And you see his example is a little bit less extreme, but you see that Jim doesn't really like himself all that much either. There's an incident where he goes on call to another noise complaint, and out of nowhere, a bullet flies into the wall right next to his head. And so he jumps and rolls down this hill. It's pouring rain, and his gun falls out of his pocket. And at some point, a kid that he had talked to previously finds the gun, grabs it, and runs off with it. And he mentions, he's like, I'm not a great guy. I lost my gun. I'm the laughing stock of my entire precinct. I am at an all-time low, and I think I'm just an idiot. And they're both kind of trauma dumping, but it's not for attention. It's because both of them, I think that even though it hurts how they feel about themselves and it hurts to admit those things, I think it's a rare moment where at the very least both of them are being seen and heard by another human being. And they're both in a weird way getting what they want, even though it stinks, if that makes sense. That might have just been rambling.
No, it makes sense. I mean, just to read a little more of this aria. So, the bird you thought you had caught beat its wings and flew away. Love stays away. You can wait for it, and when you stop waiting, there it is, right? And so, the idea is that in love, you get the opposite of what you ask for. To look at some of the characters, like this applies to pretty much everyone in the movie in its own way. So, one of the characters is this dying man, Big Earl Partridge, who has some kind of advanced chronic illness. You know, he's literally on death's door.
It's cancer.
Yeah, cancer, and he has a in-home hospice nurse, Philip Seymour Hoffman. So yeah, in this movie, like the only good characters are like the only D&D good aligned characters are Philip Seymour Hoffman, Stanley, and Jim. Essentially, everybody else is somewhere south of there on the alignment chart. But Big Earl Partridge is dying of cancer, and there's so many great scenes of him essentially confessing his life to Philip Seymour Hoffman. Because his wife isn't there. Julianne Moore is running around like a chicken with her head cut off, trying to, get his affairs in order and get his medication. And she also has this irony because she married him purely to be a gold digger. She admits this to their lawyer, and she admits to cheating around on him and so forth. So she married him entirely as a play, because
cynically
there was like a 30 or 40 year age gap, right? He's like, 90, she's like 40, I don't know. And as a result, she thought she'd be fine with him dying, but then right as he like starts to die, she actually falls in love with him, right? And that's what's, destroying her. And so again, going back to the song, that's what's happening. You're getting the opposite of what you wanted. And similarly with Big Earl Partridge, he confesses that the love of his life was his wife, right? That he had before Julianne Moore, and his son, and that he was married to her for 23 years and just ran out on the family because he didn't want to watch his wife die of cancer, which of course now is happening to him, right?
Yeah.
And the level of irony upon irony upon irony is so dense. It is a tiramisu of drama. It is so thick. I don't even know where to start.
Well, I can continue that. That's a good segue. So we were talking about Frank Mackie, the alpha male talk show guy, and his kind of plot line throughout this movie is he ends up going to a convention or a seminar, and first of all, we have to say his opening line because it hits you like a UFC fighter punching you directly in the nose. As the curtains open, he's dimly lit by this light. You can basically only see his musculature, and he slowly reaches his arms out like he's Jesus or something. And then he, bam, pops a good old flex, and then brings his arms down. And then as the lights come in, he runs right at the camera and screams, "Respect the cock and tame the cunt." And as he says that, he throws his hand forward like he's bowling. And we don't have to go into every single thing he says. It's a whole lot more of that. And at some point he says, okay, you know what? We're going to wrap up for lunch in an hour. Let's all meet back up here. And you find out that during this time, he was invited to participate in an interview. And so he It's in his hotel room. So he goes up there with his 2 huge bodyguards, and he sits down in front of a lady. And the first thing he does is he strips down into his underwear and changes in front of her while he's monologuing and humble bragging. And she's just sitting there very stoically. She's not phased. She's just there to do her interview, and it's more like eye rolling than anything. And he sits down. And so throughout the interview, throughout the movie, you jump back to this interview. And the first half of the interview is her allowing him to speak. She's asking him probing questions about his upbringing. And Frank Mackie, according to him, he says, yeah, I was raised in an all right community. My dad was in sales or something. My mom was a librarian. And, then she asks him, she's like, what does your mom think about the work you do? And he smirks and he's like, she says, Frank, go get him. And then he keeps talking and she's like, what about your father? And he's like, well, my father died a while ago. But, my mom and I, we stay connected. And she gets a little bit of a smirk. And she says, can I ask you a question? And he's like, yeah, of course. And she says something along the lines of, do you recognize this person's name? And he says, yeah, we were in the same playgrounds, or like we were the same, the same area. And she's like, this woman claims to have been your caregiver. She also claims that your father is not dead, and in fact, your mother is. And your father does not work the same career that you said. And what she does is start to unfold Frankie and identify that he's been lying about his background. And as she's doing this, Frankie doesn't yell, but you see him for the first time in the movie get shaken. Suddenly this character he plays, because it's all just a character that he's doing,
Rich,
starts to kind of
sorry to interject, but have you ever seen the Scientology thing where Tom Cruise is wearing that medallion the size of a dinner plate? And that whole persona, that whole hyper persona is exactly the same. Wait,
I have a note that's just like that. There we go. I have one note that says verbatim, not sure if Frank Mackie is coked out or just Tom Cruise in the interview.
But if that's what Mr. Cruise has brought to this world, there still remains one more word on the man. Call it Tom Cruise on Tom Cruise Scientologist.
I think it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something that you have to earn. And because a Scientologist does, he or she has the ability to create new and better realities and improve conditions. Being a Scientologist, you look at someone and you know absolutely that you can help them. So for me, it really is KSW, and it's just like, it's something that I don't mince words with that, with anything that LRH does, but that policy to me has really gone, boy. And there's a time I went through and I said, you know what? When I read it, I just went, this is it. This is exactly it. Being a Scientologist.
Yeah, by the way, this interview caused the Church of Scientology to go to war with the internet because they tried to have it removed from YouTube. And then a bunch of Anons on 4chan downloaded 800 million copies of it and spread it everywhere. And started faxing PDFs that were 300 pages of all black, paper to every Scientology office and so forth.
God damn, I miss when 4chan was like that. There was a point in 2016 where it just became unbearable, but honestly, I would not be surprised if Frank Mackie was a member of the Church of Scientology, because he gives that energy. He gives that Tom Cruise, who's the guy from Grease? John Travolta. He gives that Tom Cruise, John Travolta energy in interviews. But the reason why I brought this up is because Will was talking about Earl and Linda and Phil, the older man, his previously gold digger wife who fell in love with him, and his hospice nurse. What you find out is that Earl is actually Frank's dad. And it's nice because you've gotten to know them independently, and it makes them both three-dimensional. Earl, when you first meet him, he doesn't bring up the affairs and stuff until later. He's just this dying old man. And I felt the impulse to kind of like him because he and Philip Seymour Hoffman have chemistry, and they just talk. They'll be talking, and Philip Seymour Hoffman will say, hey, I'm worried about you. And Earl will say, "You know what I'm about to say?" And Phil will say, "Fuck off, you cocksucker." They have that sort of chemistry, like where they kind of bounce off of each other. And then on the flip side, you see Tom Cruise, who is just exclusively a piece of shit. He is totally irredeemable. And then you meet them both somewhere in the middle, because you realize that even though you still empathize for Earl abandoned his son, Frank, and he cheated on his wife. And funny enough, there's actually a line that fits in with Frank well. Earl is talking to Phil, his hospice nurse, and he says, "Oh, I fucked around on my wife." And he says, "I was such an idiot. Do you want to know why I did it? It was just because I thought that's what men do." And then to me, I'm like, that's Phil, or that's Frank. Like,
so stupid was my mind. Stupid.
And I cheated on her over and over and over again. Because I wanted to be a man. And I didn't want her to be a woman. You know, a smart, free person who was something. My fucking mind then. So stupid, that fucking mind. Stupid. Jesus Christ. What would I think? Did I think for what I'd done? She was my wife for 23 years. I went behind her over and over. Fucking asshole that I am. I'd go out and I'd come home and get in her bed and say, "I love you." Jack's mother. His mother, Lily. These two that I had. And I lost. This is the regret that you make. This is the regret that you make. And it's something you take. And the blah, blah, blah. Something. Give me a cigarette. Okay. Mistakes like this you don't make. Sometimes you make some and okay. Not okay sometimes. You make other ones. Yeah. Know that you should do better. I loved Lily. I cheated on her. She was my wife for 23 years. And I have a son. And she has cancer. And I'm not there. And he's forced to take care of her. He's 14 years old. To take care of his mother and watch her die on him. As a little kid. And I'm not there. And she does die. I loved her so. She knew what I did. She knew all the fucking stupid things I'd done. But the love was stronger than anything you can think of. The goddamn regret. The goddamn regret. And I'll die. Now I'll die. And I'll tell you what, the biggest regret of my life. I let my love go. What did I do? I'm 65 years old, and I'm ashamed. A million years ago, the fucking regret and guilt, these things, don't let anyone ever say to you, you shouldn't regret anything. Don't do that. Don't. You regret what you fucking want. Use that regret for anything, any way you want. You can use it, okay? Oh, good.
Frank's the same. Frank is like, it's kind of like when you look at an ecology chart where you see, like in the ocean, mercury going up through the predators and just eclipsing at a certain point. It's kind of like how you see successive generations of misogynist men getting more and more concentrated. And Frankie is the shark who's 50% mercury at this point. He's Jake, sorry, go on.
No, yeah. He's all DDT.
He is 100% venom.
But there's an interesting kind of flip over that happens where in the beginning, TJ is presented very unsympathetically. Like you're basically fascinated by him and hate him, right? Where you're like, this guy is not your usual customer, and basically he's evil. And you're like, okay. And then you see Big Earl Partridge, and you're like, well, this guy's kind of a grumpy old bastard, and I'm sure he has some skeletons in his closet, but you sympathize with him because you're seeing his pain, you're seeing his coughing and his fear of death and his confusion and so forth. And so you start more sympathetic to Big Earl Partridge and less sympathetic towards TJ. But then at the end of the movie, when they confront each other, and Frank or TJ or whatever, the Tom Cruise character, starts talking about what it was like to watch his mother die, and how Earl wasn't there, and that his mother, dying of cancer, waited every day by the phone for the call that never came. And you feel the raw hatred and the raw anger, and Tom Cruise looking at his dying father and saying, does it hurt? I hope it hurts. You can just go and die, right? And it's like in this moment, like it's not that you in any way like Tom Cruise, absolutely not. But you definitely kind of line up a little bit emotionally behind that anger. And again, to talk about the endless irony of this movie, this super emotional confrontation where Tom Cruise is shaking and crying and turning red and whispering just the most terrifying things to this guy, and just laying out, decades upon decades of emotional trauma. He doesn't even hear it. He's already gone to sleep from morphine, and it doesn't matter. Even at one moment, he wakes up, and Tom Cruise. This is after Tom Cruise is done ranting. There's an event that happens at the end of the movie that honestly I say we don't even go into. I was down talking about the ending of There Will Be Blood. I do think we should keep the ending of this one on the DL because it is just. We can keep the event secret, sure. Yeah, fine.
All I'll say, audience, is unless you are actually like a schizophrenic mystic, you cannot predict how this movie ends. Unless
you are
the
a
Oracle
schizophrenic
of Delphi.
mystic, there is actually some foreshadowing which we can talk about. But yeah.
If you are a schizophrenic mystic, there is room for a fourth mic on this podcast.
Send your resume to williamingles@substack.com.
We need a bad role model shaman to bless every episode.
All right. So were you making an actual point?
No, I was just talking about the connections. I suppose my point was that it's amazing as this movie goes on, the connections that all of these characters have continue to be surprising and refreshing and interesting. For a movie that is 3 hours long, this might be the only movie of that length where I can say that it justifies its own length. At no point was I ever bored. And I get bored with overly long movies. This is a movie that sucks you in, and you're not somebody watching a movie. You are a specter following these people around, and you are anchored in. You cannot look away.
And you shouldn't look away because the shot design is so good that in every scene there are so many fascinating things in the background to look at. You will have to rewatch this movie to have a basic understanding of it, because so much of it is only reconstructible at the end. So you'll need to watch it twice to really just know what happened on a basic level. And then the third time that you watch it, look for stuff in the background, because it tells a huge part of the story. Look for details, because there are so many of them. For instance, I counted at least 4 cases of the number 82 popping up in this movie. And there is absolutely a reason why. In one of the very first shots, where Sidney Behringer is getting ready to leap off the top of that building and actually get shot by a shotgun blast on the way down by his own mom. This is in the first 3 minutes of the movie. When he goes to jump off the roof, there are 2 coils of rope that spell 82 when you look in that shot. There's another shot. They do these in-between cards where they talk about the weather. And the next card says partly cloudy with an 82% chance of rain. And the apartment number on Sidney Behringer's apartment is 682. And there is a further thing that pops up, which is 2 separate times you see the Bible verse Exodus 8:2. And that's what I mean about if you're a schizo mystic, this will, this will tickle your fancy. Or like another example is Stanley, who's like, I don't know, a 9-year-old boy. He, after school goes to the library, and he has, the library table in front of him with like 15 open books spread out. And I went ahead and wrote them down. So they say, Our Changing Weather, The Book of Unusual Natural Phenomena, The History of Freemasonry by Albert Mackie, The Book of Mormon, Everyday Weather and How It Works. Then there's just various books with clouds and tornadoes in them. Another book that says, Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women, Unique, Eccentric, and Amazing Entertainers. Wild Talents by Charles Fort, a book of child prodigies. Another one called Machinery and Mechanical Processes, the Case Book of Forensic Investigation, the Guinness Book of World Records. And yeah, like that table right there is basically the theme clusters for the movie.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So before I watched this, you mentioned, hey, Richard, look out for the number 82. And then I totally forgot and didn't. What is the significance of 82 in this movie?
I can't talk about it because it would give away the event. But if you look up Exodus 8:2, you'll understand. So I'll give Richard a moment to look up Exodus 8:2.
I don't need to. I grew up Catholic. I've read the book of Exodus, and I know what event it's referring to.
Okay,
audience,
great.
Don't you dare. Audience, Papa Richard's going to be real cranky if you look that up before you see the movie, okay? All y'all got to see this. This is bad role models homework for all of you. Watch this movie. You will not regret it.
Yeah, in the audience of the What Do Kids Know show, there's a guy with a sign that says Exodus 8:2, and then in another shot, which is a street shot of like Magnolia Avenue, because that's where this all happens, is a street called Magnolia Avenue. There is like, how bus stops will have, those big posters in the side advertising something?
Yeah. Like
it was a white
court and shit.
Yeah, it was just a white piece of paper with typewriter lowercase font that just says Exodus 8:2. So anyway, this is definitely in the movie, guys. I swear to God. And there's just so many of these things that are in there. Like for instance, the Beach Boys album, Surf's Up. The album art is a famous painting of a rider on a horse, with an extreme forward tilt, and that song Surf's Up is about a tidal wave that comes and sweeps away the past, an irresistible force of change that breaks over everything. And you'll see that if you look at the scene where TJ's being interviewed. and so on and so forth. There's an endless number of these little background details, including the fact that what's his name? Bert. So Jimmy Gator, right, is the Alex Trebek of the show, and his producer, his guy that he's been working with on the show forever, is a guy named Bert who actually looks kind of like Stanley Kubrick, I think. And when he goes to pat Jimmy on the back right before the show, he's wearing a Freemason ring, and he says, "We meet upon the level and are parting on the square," which is the words of a very famous Freemason poem. And so this is also in line with, like, you know, certain conspiracy theories about secret societies. I had the subtitles turned on for this, which was a big help. There's a scene where after Stanley pees himself on the set and, you know, kind of crashes the whole thing, where and Jimmy has a heart attack as well. You know, it all goes to shit, and then Stanley's dad comes running into the studio to try and grab Stanley, and he runs into Bert, and he says to him, let me find, I think I wrote it down. Yeah, he calls him a boy producer punk, which, I mean, boy producer, you know, it's really ironic to call the guy that you gave your kid over to a pedophile, considering you knew that and you gave your kid over to him. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of this shit hit a little different after Epstein. I'll say that.
Yeah, after it all got blown out. One thing I do want to say, also, you keep on calling Gary Gator Alex Trebek. I noticed his name. It
no offense
reminded
to Alex Trebek, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. We're not alluding to anything. One thing I will allude to, because he was convicted, his Gary Gator reminded me of the name Gary Glitter. Are you familiar with this person?
I think his name is Jimmy Gator, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it's Jimmy Gator. Yeah.
Oh, it is. Sorry. I think I wrote, ironically, I wrote Jimmy Gator. Sorry. So Jimmy Gator, it reminded me, I know why I wrote down Gary, and eventually. Jimmy Gator reminds me of the name Gary Glitter. And like I said, are you familiar with that person?
No.
I won't go into detail, but Gary Glitter was a British child's entertainer. And long story short, he got busted for being a prolific predator. And funny enough, what's actually not funny at all, for any of the viewers, another movie I'd recommend that is on the opposite side of the intellectual spectrum, 28 years later, they end up having a character that's based off of Jimmy Savile, which is another
I was
British
just
entertainer.
about to mention him. Yeah, if you know, you know.
Yeah, Gary Glitter is a Jimmy Savile. Yeah.
Well, I thought the name Jimmy Gator was funny because, you know, Jimmy Alligator, it's like, what do we associate with, you know, alligators? Like, they're cold, you know, they're reptilian, they're carnivorous, you know, and Jimmy in this movie is extremely flat and unemotional. I mean, he really doesn't display any emotion over anything, over having a heart attack, over confessing to his wife that he cheated on her. I mean, he doesn't have a single emotion. He is like a reptile in this movie. And it gets more disturbing as you watch more of it. So.
Well, and he refuses to take any accountability. It's weird because he laments the evil things he did and acknowledges them, but not in any meaningful way that results in anything good. While he's and his wife are fighting, and he's admitting to his wife that he had multiple affairs, she asks a very poignant question, one that she probably already knows the answer to, which is, why does our daughter Claudia not talk to you anymore? Because she'll talk to her mom. And he says, I don't know. You know, I'll say this. It may have been when she ran away that night. She accused me of doing inappropriate things with her, but I don't know. And his wife keeps saying, like, what did you do, Jimmy? And all he says, and he never changes his script, is, I don't know. I can't remember. I can't remember what happened. As he's just leaning back in his chair, looking at the roof. You know, even at the end of his life, he is just Jimmy Gator. He's an alligator. He's a reptile.
Yeah. I'm just going through my notes here. One of my absolute favorite shots in any movie is back. So in the Tom Cruise scene where he's at this workshop, right? It's like a darkened theater with maybe 100 guys in the audience. and there's velvet drapes and a spotlight, and he's prancing about on stage like he's doing like a Tony Robbins seminar, and he's got one of those flip boards over in the corner. And he's like, all right, if you open to, page 16 in your white booklets, we'll be going over a very important tactic. And then the spotlight swings over to this flipboard that just says, how to fake like you are a nice and caring person.
It's funny. I literally wrote that down verbatim in my notes. How to pretend like you are nice and caring.
Yeah.
Well, and during that seminar, that's kind of when he breaks down too, because for the first time ever, he's been seen. There's a scene I want to talk about, and then we can probably start wrapping this up. I think, unless you have more to add.
No, I'm keeping you on this a lot longer. So,
well, you know what? I apologize. Then, audience, will maybe edit this out or don't, and the audience can judge me. There's this scene near the end of the movie. Audience, this movie it's putting a pot. Imagine sealing every hole in your teapot and filling it with water and boiling it until it explodes. That is this movie for almost 3 hours. And there is a point where this movie is hitting its emotional climax. It's not an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration to say that nearly every character is at an all-time low. Even our wonderful Jim, mid-date, Claudia panics and runs away. So even he is at his rock bottom when he thought he was going to find love. And this song comes on. It's called Wise Up by Amy Mann. And it's playing, and there's this line that keeps repeating, which is, it's not going to stop. And as this song plays, there's kind of this surreal moment in the movie where every character, it jumps from character to character, all 10 of them, and all of them in unison are singing this song together. And if I could say that this movie is about anything, just to go back to the beginning of this podcast, it is about how sometimes we get so zoomed in on our own life, especially when horrible things are happening. And then sometimes, like I mentioned, the ammonia stick of life comes in and something completely, almost meaninglessly impossible to understand happens. Something weird. Like, for anybody out there, have you ever been, let's say, freshly after you lose a loved one, right? When somebody you really cared about, where life just feels surreal. You still have to go to work. You still have to talk to your friends or your significant other, but you're just kind of on automatic mode, and you're driving down the street, and out of nowhere, a homeless guy with his wiener out runs in front of your car, and it just wakes you back up, and you're like, what the fuck? It rips you out of this melancholy you've been in. That is... Right before the homeless guy with his wiener out on Sports Arena Boulevard runs in front of you, it's like you're singing that song, It's Not Going to Stop, and then suddenly you are just something indescribable happens, and you're like, it's one of those things where it's so weird, but you almost laugh, and you're like, oh yeah, like life goes on. Like, it rips you out of the sadness. And I won't say what the ending is, but the scene that I'm describing where they're singing Wise Up and they're saying it's not going to stop, almost immediately predicates the homeless man with his penis out, figuratively speaking.
Yeah, there are two scenes, right, back to back, that each of them by themselves are like two of the greatest scenes in cinema. The first is this again camera tunnel where you have what I like to call a brainwave synchronization event, where all of these characters, metaphorically and through this Amy Mann song, are singing the same song without knowing it. They're singing the same song without knowing it. But because you're looking at them from this higher dimensional, film perspective, you can tell that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And this is like 2.5 hours into the movie, it's like in a heavy downpour, and like this scene makes me cry every time I see it. And then the event, and it is it is the biggest 1-2 punch you can receive in a movie. And yeah, I could go on endlessly about how well acted this movie is. I mean, you know, like we've made fun of Tom Cruise and stuff, but I mean, Tom Cruise's acting in this is not only, I think, the best Tom Cruise role ever, but it's just some of the best acting ever.
He's a really talented person.
He is unbelievably good at playing a mentally and emotionally scarred male chauvinist cult leader. So make of that what you will. But this movie is, and then, you know, I'll admit I'm kind of in love with Julianne Moore. So, you know,
Speaking of which, I wrote a note. Remember when Blue Velvet came out and Roger Ebert. Sorry, I almost said Robert Eggers. Roger Ebert came out and said, you know, oh, this is a decent movie, but the exploitation of Isabella, what's your last name? Isabella Rossellini. You know, it just makes me sick how he's exploiting these women. And then I read his review for Magnolia, and he's like 4 out of 4 stars. It's like an opera, and I wonder why he's not. I wonder why, just to stay consistent, why he wasn't like, why does PTA love torturing Julianne Moore?
Yeah, I've never liked Roger Ebert. Not that I dislike him or anything, but I've never understood how he came to be the movie critic. But whatever. Julianne Moore's acting in this is it's impossible to look away. She plays like the most frazzled, emotionally bankrupt, frantic, concerned wife that you can imagine. And someone that's racked with grief, someone that is, caring for someone that she loves who is dying and who is just being rudely jerked around this way and that by random people in the outside world. And this movie is, one thing I'll say is that if you have trouble with suicidal ideation, I would not watch this movie because it has 4 suicide scenes and a death scene. So I think maybe pass on this if you're in the wrong state of mind.
Let's put that in the description because we're an hour and 7 minutes.
It certainly will. Yeah. If you have child sexual abuse or suicidal thoughts, you should not watch this movie. Or you should at least know that this movie has those things in it. So, yeah. And I mean, what else to say, really? This movie, to me, makes me feel alive. Makes me feel like a human being. It is punishing. It does not in any way feel like it is the product of some just or loving God. It's not some fairy tale ending where everybody gets what they deserve. Nor is it random, right? It's in this space that is the middle point between, something like our imagination of perfect justice and just the random chaos of the universe, where it's not what you want it to be, right? It's not perfect resolution and redemption or appropriate desserts for everyone. It's not resolved or finished, really. And it's not just nihilistic chaos. It's somehow neither of these things. And that's what makes it feel real. And I think drama should always feel real, and this does.
Yeah. Well, and also it asks a lot of its actors, but it's also not exploitation. Because I believe we brought this up in our last episode. The thing that I love so much about Paul Thomas Anderson is he likes getting in the mud with his characters. He likes finding troubled people and exploring them. But you can tell that he has empathy for all of them. Even Tom Cruise, even for Frankie, for all of these people, this movie is about seeing the humanity in everybody to an extent. Speaking of which, Will, can I make a public apology?
Yes. Would you like to repent for a sin?
This is Father Ted. I have something to confess. I rewatched The Whale and I didn't laugh once. It's actually a really good movie, and even though he does roll around on the floor and pour mayonnaise on pizza, it did make me cry at the end, and I respect it.
Okay. I accept your apology. God forgives you, my son.
I'm
Three
apologizing to
three
Darren
Our
Aronofsky.
Fathers and 4 Hail Marys. Yeah.
Word. Sick.
I have no idea what you Catholics say to each other in the box. That's just my best guess.
Honestly, like, I didn't mind confession as a kid. What the fuck are we talking about confession for?
Okay. When I got to the end of this thing, I wrote I wrote 3 paragraphs, which I can say right at the end. But there's one more scene I want to talk about. So
Do it.
It's clear that Claudia, right, is the young, very like constantly on the edge of tears, promiscuous, coke addict woman in the movie, and
daughter of Jimmy Glitter, or I'm sorry, Jesus Christ, Jimmy Gator.
Yeah, if you look in the credits, it says her name is Claudia Wilson Gator, I think. But in the movie, she actually like refers to herself as Claudia Wilson. Like she gets rid of her father's name. Anyway, so yeah, that's an interesting detail. If you look at the actual credit roll, Rose, which is Jimmy's wife, goes by Rose Wilson and then Claudia Wilson. So they symbolically, reject their awful child molester husband / father. So, but what's disturbing is that Claudia is still, I think, attached to her father because she regularly watches that show, the What Do Kids Know show, and you see her watch. You see it in the background while she is having sex with that guy that she picked up at the bar. And then again, you see after the game show goes to pieces because basically Stanley is not treated right by the producers or by the other kids, and he urinates on himself, and then the producer or the Alex Trebek guy, Jimmy Gator, who's doing the game show, he has a heart attack, and they have to cut away to a card. And then when they come back for like the equivalent of Final Jeopardy, Stanley has this whole confrontation with him that feels like a kid speaking as a prophet to the adult world. And basically what Stanley says to him is, we're not toys, we're not cute. We're not here just for your amusement. We have feelings, we matter, and we have the right to not do what you want us to do. And Jimmy just doesn't know what to say to that. He stammers, and then they cut the program. And then as soon as the program cuts, it cuts to Claudia watching that happen live, watching her father, who molested her as a child, being told by another child, you don't get to do whatever you want to us, and then crashing the whole program. And then she's in tears. And you don't know why she's crying so hard until you've already seen it through to the end. And that's what I mean about you have to watch this thing probably multiple times to find all the little fibrils that run through it.
Yeah, no, it is. You know what? There is one thing that I need to verbally get out of my mind. So, audience, there's something you need to know about Paul Thomas Anderson. And it's that he's not one person. He's 2 people. There's cocaine Paul Thomas Anderson, and there's no cocaine Paul Thomas Anderson. Our last episode, we did no cocaine Paul Thomas Anderson. After he makes Magnolia, I think he does that, probably goes on a bender, and is like, I need to repair my life, marries Maya Rudolph, and gets his shit together. And his movies become much more slow, much more subdued. Not worse necessarily, because There Will Be Blood comes out, The Master comes out, plenty of movies that are still wonderful, but the vibe changes. If you all want to have an entry into Paul Thomas Anderson, I would recommend 2 of his 3 pre-sobriety movies, which is this Magnolia, which is something that I think that, obviously the warnings we gave aside, if the plot entices you and you feel like you're emotionally ready to take that on, watch this movie. The other one, Boogie Nights. Like I said, I didn't feel like I had, even though I love that movie and it's one of my favorites, I felt like the conversation would kind of just be like The Master was in our last episode, where I just summarized it a lot, so I felt it unnecessary. I didn't feel like I had anything new to say about it, but I will say it is a adventure. It is a cinematic buffet, I think is how I've described it before. It's got everything. It's got humor, drama. At some point, Alfred Molina plays the scariest motherfucker you've ever seen in your entire life, with a little Filipino boy throwing firecrackers while he's waving a gun around. That movie is, long story short, you watch these movies and you're like, yeah, no, the guy that watched, or that was just geeking out, the guy, whoever made this, was just freaking out. In fact, I invented a new genre of cinema. Will, are you ready to hear it?
Always.
It's called sad on cocaine, and that I think sad on cocaine is Magnolia's genre. It is somehow depressing and thrilling at the same time. And the nice thing, audience, is even though it was kind of emotionally devastating to watch, the ending really does. It's the rope that pulls you out of the valley. The ending hits you well enough that it makes it all worth it. This is Will and I, and it may not sound this way based off of the movies we've talked about. Neither Will nor myself enjoy misery porn. Neither of us enjoy movies that are sad and depressing purely for the sake of allowing you as an audience to be voyeuristic with suffering and watch it and say, oh, horrible things are happening to these people. No, Will and I like sad movies when that sadness means something, when it earns the sadness, when it earns the valley. And I can't think of a better example of a movie that does that than Magnolia.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else to add, or should I just read my little thing and we'll be done here?
Read your little thing. I'm stoked to hear
it. So right after I finished this movie, I had my laptop and I'm like, okay, I'll just press something out real quick while it's hot from the fire. So here's what I wrote. And I apologize for the quality of my voice. I've been sick for a week and I'm still not all the way better. An emotional hurricane, a punishment and a redemption that feels biblical, and in so many ways it is. Julianne Moore frantically defends her dignity in the fluorescent night of the pharmacy checkout lane. Tom Cruise holds back and forces out tears at the same time, his hands in a death grip. Amy Mann's impossibly sincere and tender voice floating ethereally through the film, haunting and commanding the emotional gravity, which is turned way, way up. A movie that is brutal and tender in equal measure, something that feels honest, human fragility on its most sympathetic and incisive display, a phantasmagoria of filmic effects, match cuts, time jams that smash and stretch, follow shots longer than anyone can hold their breath, cunning set design, a vast tapestry of background placements that make you jump for your notepad, slow zooms that draw you out of your seat, a visual lexicon of shot geometries that are well outside the standard rule of thirds or Fibonacci, but most importantly, characters, humans, people that are true condensates, shepherds of wrecked lives and life's wreckage, confrontations with the already dead, journeys to nowhere, punishment for other people's crimes, salvation, but for no good reason at all, selfishness, poetry, parsimony, and pathology, all in neon, all broadcast live, directly into your home. Fulfilling the old avant-garde slogan, comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. I once heard of an insane composer, maybe Stockhausen, who crashed marching bands into each other for fun to see what sounds they would make. This is like clashing Greek tragedies together, which all share the same, apparently minor figure, as if Oedipus, Orestes, Pentheus, and the Furies were all trapped in a ball of cosmic yarn, a vast spiderweb of almost invisible intercausalities, as fated as it is chosen, as it is pure dumb luck. As we got to rest for a while, hammock-like on that web, and see what little creatures there were scurrying around down there. And there are some truly chilling specimens. Our slate of villains, the pedophiles, manipulators, narcissists, murderers, homewreckers, thieves, shitty kids, various enablers, exploiters, and profiteers. We see their lies, their justifications, their confessions, and their rewards. That's what this movie is, and why it is so upsetting to some. It is what the rite of confession looks like in the 21st century. Linda confesses to sucking other men's cocks to her lawyer because there is no priest. Earl confesses to abandoning his family to Phil because there is no priest. Donnie confesses how pathetic he is to John C. Reilly because there is no priest. TJ Mackie, refuses to confess to Guinevere and ends up confessing to his dying father, confessing both that he hates him, as he says over and over, and that he loves him, as revealed by his failure to suppress his tears. Jimmy confesses, in a deliberately half-assed way, to molesting his daughter before trying to kill himself and still managing to fail even at that. And that's all I managed to write down before I fell asleep. So yeah.
Hey, bam. I think that wraps it up perfectly and summarizes it. Hey, silence. There we go.
Dork. God. All right.
And by the way, audience, I was clapping with one hand, so take that, Bodhisattvas. Okay, thank you everybody for listening. We love you, and we hope you enjoyed the episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye.